Hello and welcome to The Stammerer. This is Anyone Can Run, where we discuss how you run, topics, the science behind it, and how you can improve. Thank you for listening. Hello and welcome to The Stammerer. Anyone can run, which I truly believe that anybody can run. And it's such a minefield out there with couch to 5k, couch to 10k, the half marathon, the full marathon, and you may think you're too young, too old to run, but I think that anybody can run, and this is the first really in a series of podcasts to show you, and hopefully you'll be able to listen to it, run, and enjoy it. Thank you for listening, and let's get to it. So is age a factor? So this leads perfectly on to your heart rate. So this episode we'll be talking about, I guess, age and heartbeat and why that's important initially and important throughout, really, to be able to run for longer and be able to kind of stay injury free to a degree. So can you run at any age? Yes, and you're never too old to run. What I guess impedes that is how injured you actually are. Even then, you can always walk. When we say run, I think people are too caught up in, we need to run fast. You need to run super fast. And previously, I've been under that illusion as well, that you kind of need to run fast all of the time, and when you run it means you have to be this athlete and wear all this gear and the best shoes, and it's just simply not true. The best way to do this is to take a step back and to understand what it is you're trying to achieve. What's your aim? Is your aim just to start to run? Is your aim a 5k, a 10k, a half marathon, a 10 mile, the full marathon? And almost kind of manage your expectations, and then you can go from there. So the first place that I would start is you decided that you want to run. Fantastic. Now, I would say you need to think about the science of this. And when I say science, it sounds really overly complex. But what I did is I just decided to sort of run. And then I couldn't, but when I say run, I used to try and run as fast as I could for as long as I could, until I either stopped, was out of breath, my legs hurt. That is just simply not the way to do it. So I learnt the hard way. And then this is where age comes into it. Now, when I say age, we're talking about our max heart rate here, and we're talking about how, you may have heard the term BPM, so your beats per minute or your heart rate, okay? And you may have heard the term like the zone 1 to 5. So what this is trying to do, and this is, I believe that this is a key factor, number one thing to understand. So what they're trying to say is that if you factor how you feel when you run, so if you do an easy run, it feels okay, you can breathe, and then it gets harder and harder and harder. So what they say is that if you split these into the 5 zones, and if you stay within these zones, so if you roughly know the zones that you're in, you'll be able to gauge, potentially how injured that you could potentially get. So for example, if you run 10 miles in zone 1, you're not going to exert as much fuel and burn as much fuel, and you have less of a risk of injury if you're in, say, zone 3 or 4. So to work out a max heart rate, you simply take your age and take it away from 220 beats per minute. This will give you your maximum heart rate. So, for example, in this instance, 220, my age minus 40 gives me a maximum heart rate of 180. Now, this is not foolproof. You may be less, you may be more, depends on you as a person, but it gives you a gauge. So what they then do is they say, right, we're going to set 5 zones. So imagine 180 is your top end. So zone 1 will be 50 to 60% of 180. Zone 2 will be 60 to 70% of 180. Zone 3 will be 70 to 80% of 180. Zone 4 will be 80 to 90% of 180. So what that basically means for me in this example here, so where zone 5 would be your anaerobic zone, and I can explain that in a bit, is my 180. So that is maximum. That is where I don't want to be. You don't want to be zone 5 unless you're a sprinter or at the very end of a race and you're giving it full whack. The problem with being in zone 5 is you can't breathe, and this is where your body burns sugar and basically wants to get injured. Okay, so if we take my example, my zone 1, my aerobic space is a good space, is 90 to 108 beats per minute. So I should be, that's like a walking pace. That's just an easy pace. Zone 2, when I start to move, my beats per minute should be about 108 to 126. So that means that, I've started to move a little bit more and they've increased, but I'm still in that aerobic zone. So I still should be able to talk. Now, zone 3 is kind of that midway between sort of easy-ish, more so to kind of faster pace. And that's about 126 to 144 beats per minute. So this should be where you're actually, this is your kind of easy to mid run. So this is where your core work is done. So when you're out there on a run, if you have a watch, it makes it easier. So if you're about 144 at like the top end of it, you should be working okay. But this is where you're in your full easy run. And then getting into zone 4. So this is where the crossover happens between your zone 3 and your zone 4. So midway, the top end of zone 3, the beginning of the zone 4. So around about 144 for me to about 156-ish. That's where I kind of am at my medium pace. So anything more than that, if I then go to the top of zone 4, about 162, that's your tempo zone. So the tempo are a useful tool because you need to learn to run fast. Okay, so you should be in the tempo zones for as short as possible. So your tempo, zone should be shorter distances. Short sprints where you stop and you break and then you continue again. So your run should be split into these easy runs in your aerobic zones 1 to 3 to the bottom half of 3. Then you can kind of increase that pace, to top end of zone 3 to the beginning of zone 4. Zone 4 really is your faster paces, but you don't really want to nudge into the zone 5. And then if you're in zone 5, this is where you can't breathe anymore. So, and you can over time kind of learn roughly where you're at and control your pace. And it's really important to control your pace, because if you look at the Makoto method, which is basically you do everything at 80% easy and 20% hard, and that basically means that you are building up your lungs. And when we say 80% easy pace, this can be a zone 3, and this can be an easy pace, but it doesn't mean it's not hard, because if you run at an easy pace for about 20 miles, you think about that, you're building yourself up, you're building your engine to be able to run, and your body needs time to adapt and be able to run for that amount of time. And the only way to do that is to build your engine. So you build it in your zone 2, your zone 3. You can dip into zone 4, but then you can come back. So any work that you do, really, and if it works for you, is the 80% easy running, 20% hard. And when we say hard, that's zone 4. We don't tend to ever dip into your zone 5. So back to the zones. So one of the key things about the zones is that when you run, what you're trying to do is you're trying to navigate between increasing the mileage, increasing your aerobic base, but also you don't want to get injured as well. So I think I would probably say, when people start to run, or those people that run, you're going to get injured at some point. And I think that the majority of people, when they start to run, you have no idea how long and how fast to run for. And sometimes it's not always, easy to buy a watch, because that's quite expensive. So, the kind of old school way to do things is the best, is a case of, if you've never run ever, then, almost think about, for example, like can you run a mile? Kind of figure out what a mile is, and just run that at an easy pace. So it's a pace where you can talk. Okay, so that's sort of where you need to envision, if you've never run ever, is you need to be able to talk. And when I say talk, not walk and talk, but when you run, you should be able to talk, and it should be comfortable. If it's not comfortable and you need to walk, then you walk. It's all about being comfortable. When you start to run, enjoy it. It shouldn't be. It's going to be hard, because any exercises, the fact that you've put on some shoes, the fact that you've left the house and you've gone out there for a run, I commend you completely. But it shouldn't be hard. It should be fun, and that's what it's all about. When you then train for something, yeah, of course it's going to get hard. You can't run like a half marathon, a full marathon, and it's fun because it's not fun. But you train your body 80% of the time, so you enjoy the running. And if you stick to zone 1, 2, 3, and you stick to the 80%, you'll get injured less. And then when it comes to how far should you run, so that is a difficult thing to quantify. But I would say that you if you're reasonably fit, you should be able, I think, on a first go, to be able to do, at least a mile to 2 miles. That sounds like a lot, but if you're going at an easy pace, take it easy, and you should be able to do 2 to 3 miles. Okay, so somewhere between 3.5k to 5k. So it really depends on what you think. So a mile is longer than a k. There's 1.6k in a mile. So however far you run, just enjoy the pace. So let's just say right, okay, so you do 2-3 miles and you go at an easy pace, and give yourself a day or two, and then you're going to go 2-3 days after, and then you start to get into a, like an everyday, like a plan. Okay, now I can't stress this enough, whereby a lot of injuries come from you overrun in the first couple of weeks, and you overrun maybe in the first week where you don't run before. It's like when you do anything, the gym, a run, any sport, when you're lifting boxes around the house. If you've not done it for a long time, you feel great. The next day you feel great, and then the day after, that's when it hits your body. So imagine if you run on a Monday, then a Tuesday, and a Wednesday, you may feel great, and then by the Wednesday evening, you've done 3 days of 3 miles. That's 9 to 12 miles in 3 days. Your body's going to suffer, and your body is going to hurt. So what you need to do is understand that it takes a long time, or it takes a little bit of time for your body to get up to speed, and that's okay. So in terms of the mileage, if you start off maybe thinking, I might do, I don't know, say 3 to 8 miles a week. And when I say that, I mean, some people may be able to do, a mile and a half, maybe 3 times a week. Some people may be able to do 2 miles 3 times a week. And I would go for 3 times a week at the very start. And then what I would then do is I would not increase that by more than 10 to 15% per week. So if you do, let's just say you do 10 miles a week, then the next week you do 10% more. So you only increase that by a mile. So that may not seem like a lot, but 10% to 15% increase is a lot. So you increase that mileage by a mile. And then in the following week, you can increase that again by 10 to 15%. Now, in the 4th week, you then bring that down. So maybe you'll do 6 miles, maybe you do 5 miles, perhaps you'll just take a break. So get into this habit of every 4 weeks. So 3 weeks, you start off, say you do 10 miles, then the next week you do 11 miles, and then the next week maybe you'll do maybe 13 miles. And the following week you may do nothing at all, or you may drop down to 5. Okay, so you need that easy week in there to recover. Your body needs to recover and fuel, and then you start again. And then in week 5, you can then start off on maybe the 13 miles. Maybe you want to just dip it back down to about 12, and then you can increase that by 10% again. So then you go to 13.2 and so on and that's how you can increase, is that once you got to that 3rd mile, you break on the 4th, but then the mileage you got to in the 3rd mile in the 3rd week, in the 5th week, you can then continue. So you just need to rest, and it's continually to rest. And don't exceed 10 to 15% increase week on week. And in the 4th week, have a rest. Resting is absolutely key. This has been the Stammerer Anyone Can Run. Next week, we'll be talking about my favourite subject, trainers. If I could ask you to like the podcast, it helps us out immensely to be able to produce more content. Thank you for listening, and take care. See you soon.